This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to this week's Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. This week, we are going to talk about creative thinking. Now, creative thinking, a lot of people think it's just about that ability to just crank out large number of ideas. I would disagree. Creative thinking is much more than just that. Creative thinking is a lifestyle. It's almost a personality trait. It really is a way of seeing and perceiving the world, and more importantly, using creative thinking to change the world. Now, I've said this many times on this show, that creative thinking is the fundamental skill that will determine future success. You go back and look at all of the leading thinkers, leading innovators, CEOs have started companies, leading technologists. It's that ability to apply creative thinking to identify the problem, come up with a solution, and bring that to market. Now, many people think that creative thinking is just a single thinking style, that you only, you either have this magic thing called creative thinking or you don't. Now, I'm here to dispel that myth. We all have a variety of different thinking styles that we just naturally have. Some cases, it's a little bit of our DNA. It's how we're raised in our household, how our parents thought. We tend to mimic thinking styles within families. It's the educational system. Did you have a teacher that exposed you to different types of thinking styles? And we tend to fall into kind of certain buckets of these thinking styles. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk through the variety of thinking styles that are out there. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert in all kinds of thinking styles, but my hope today is to at least expose you to you being able to say, hold on, I kind of see myself as that style or see myself as this style. The result, though, being that I want to wrap it all together and show you how any of these thinking styles can be the foundation for how you think creatively. We all don't think creatively in the same way. Creative thinking is not a 12-step process that you just magically learn and can apply. It's really about understanding the thinking style you have and then understanding how to use that to come up with ideas in a unique and different way. Now, to start off, the one thinking style that we tend to all try to bucket ourselves into is either what's called left dominant or right dominant. Now, left dominant tends to get categorized as people who are, more analytical, and the people right dominant is more creative. And that's not the case. Again, I'm trying to dispel this myth that only a certain segment of the population have the ability to think creatively. That is not the case. We are all naturally creative. So if you are left dominant creative, then you tend to be a more conforming person. You tend to want to fall in line with the teams or the organizations. You prefer structured assignments, have your boss lay out the tasks that you need to do. Then you tend to want to follow that and execute those systematically. You tend to be very good at recalling verbal material. That's the way you collect facts, is through you're much more verbal dominant. The issue there is that will cause you to tend to sequence ideas in the form of an outline. You tend to listen, you tend to outline, and that's where you trigger your ideas from the creative process. Then you'll also try to draw that into some form of set of conclusions in order to try to solve the problem logically. Again, this is where the left dominant brain kind of analogy, people say, oh, if you're left dominant, you're much more systematic, you're much more logical. And it's through this process of listening verbally, outlining what you're understanding, looking at things systematically. But in that process, you are generating ideas. You are creative. And then through that whole process, then coming up with those ideas that can be improved. If you are right dominant creative versus left dominant creative, you tend to be the non-conforming person. You tend to be in some cases, you might have been the black sheep of the family. You prefer open-ended assignments. Just give me the end result, and I'll figure out a way to get from A to B. Don't break it down for me. And therefore, then you kind of go through this whole process of exploring. How do you get from the ultimate target from where you're at today? You got an assignment to go do something or solve a problem. It's that exploration that tends to then stir up the ideas for you. You also look for ways of looking at things in a summary form. You're not into the details. You're not into getting into the nitty gritty. You don't need that input in order to come up with the ideas for the solution. And then you tend to solve problems intuitively. You tend to use your gut much more so than any other way. And so therefore, that's how you come up with the ideas to invent. So this isn't a situation where if you're right-brained, you're more creative, and left-brained, you're not creative. We are all creative in some form of a natural way. Now, the challenge, though, with left brain and right brain is you also run into a thinking style of what I kind of fall into is fast thinking and slow thinking. Now, fast thinking is, you make that snap decision, you get that gut, you're going to go with it. I've seen people that are left dominant, very analytical, who are also fast thinkers. In that case, what they're using is the experience. Oh, I've seen this pattern before. I know how this story is going to end. I'm going to jump to the end because I'm applying all the logic that I've collected over the years, and I know this plays very, very well. I know how this story is going to wrap up. Same type is that when you think about right brain thinking, that tends to be people who are fast thinkers. But in this case, I've also seen right brain thinkers, right brain creatives, being slow thinkers, albeit they aren't looking at it from an analysis perspective. What they are doing is they're looking at it from the standpoint of that whole discovery. They want to go out and search. They want to really open themselves up. They want to get away from the current environment. They want to be kind of not the analytical side so much as it is just trying to understand where that opportunities for discovery. So in this case, you have both left brain thinkers who are both fast thinkers and slow thinkers. Same case is right brain creatives. You have fast thinkers and slow thinkers. And so the challenge there is really not a challenge so much as it is be careful of trying to bucketize either yourself or other people on your team as being, left brain not creative, right brain is creative. They are both creative, and they both can come up with absolutely phenomenal, great ideas. You just need to understand those thinking styles. Now, fast thinking is great from the standpoint of when you're, for instance, under threat. You're being attacked by a bear. You want to be fast thinking, know that you got to get out of there. You're going to solve the problem of getting away from this bear. Fast thinking can get you into a lot of trouble in creativity from the standpoint of fast thinking tends to correlate to using your past background and experience. You fall on what you know in the past. And that history, in some cases, can actually work against you because you'll apply what happened, the old ideas, the old innovations, those old things, and try to apply them to your current solution. So even though you may naturally be a fast thinker, you can become a slow thinker. And we'll talk about that here a little bit later in the show. So again, just to kind of summarize, just setting the foundation as we continue this discussion today, you can be both left dominant creative and you can be right brain, right dominant creative. They are both creative. They are creative in different ways. Applied to that, independently, you can be a fast thinker or you can be a slow thinker. In some cases, people refer to fast thinking as intuitive, slow thinking as being rational thinking. And we'll talk more about this again, a little bit later in the show. So, which side are you on? Are you a left dominant creative or are you a right dominant creative? That's an important question to answer just from the standpoint of knowing where you are today and how to apply that to be more creative. And we're going to cover more of this as we come back from this commercial break. So stay right there. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back. Picking up where we left off, let's talk a little bit more about rational versus intuitive thinking. Now, what is the definition that I'm applying to rational thinking? Rational thinking is those that people that use kind of a pattern of thought. This involves really relying on very specific information, lots of detail that you've learned from the past, thinking concretely, and ignoring, the gut instincts. It's all about the facts, right? Now, again, this can be applied to those that are right dominant or left dominant, but rational thinking is about getting rid of kind of the gut and looking at the facts. Now, those facts can be data, which would be kind of more left brain centric, or it could be right brain in the fact that you're collecting a perspective. You're ignoring your own opinions and you're getting out, for instance, and talking to customers and understanding what their needs and what their issues are. So rational thinking is kind of ignoring, what your gut is telling you and really getting out there and doing that analysis, whether it be hard facts, hard data, things like on left brain dominant creatives or in right brain dominant creatives. You're getting out there and you're interacting, you're discovering, but you are able to keep your gut in check and not use that as your fallback. Now, the opposite of this rational thinking is intuitive thinking. Intuitive thinking really is about using your gut, getting kind of a sense or feel or, getting that special feeling that says, whoa, this is it. I just know it is. I just know it in my heart. I don't have the data, but boy, I just know this is the right way to go. Now, in the case of both rational and intuitive, we tend to fall into those naturally. Those are ones that just tend to come to us based on however we've been comfortable in the past. In some cases, rational or intuitive thinking really gets dictated by past success. If you used your gut a couple of times and boy, you just had really great success, then you fall into the mindset of saying, trust your gut. In the case of maybe you tried the gut thing and it doesn't work for you, you fall back on the facts. You want to do the rational thinking. So the question that comes up is can having somebody use an opposite method, does that generate them or cause them to be more creative? So there have been a number of studies in this area. In one particular study, participants were given a real-world problem, meaning this wasn't a fake. They were given the challenge of solving or helping a local business expand. Now, the results were evaluated by the managers from the company involved. And they asked the people, so people who were naturally rational, they were asked to use their gut. Those people who were naturally intuitive, using their gut, they were told to be more rational in the process of creating these ideas for this small business. When they looked at the results, really this manipulation had worked, forcing people to use an opposite method than they naturally use. People were much more creative when they used a thinking style that was most unusual to them. So in this case, this test was for rational versus intuitive thinking. So if you're naturally rational, one way to be highly creative is to use the opposite. Be much more intuitive. Trust your gut. See what your gut says and use the ideas that your gut generates. Versus if you're naturally intuitive, if you're kind of a shoot from the hip, trust that gut, force yourself to be more rational. Just be rational through a series of exercises when you're coming up with ideas for whatever project you're currently working at. Now, the question is, why does this work? Well, one argument is that by forcing you to use the opposite method that just comes naturally to you, it gets your brain to kind of stop going down just the natural path that it normally goes on. Look, we all get caught in the rut. We all get caught wanting to do the same thing over and over again. It's worked for us on the last 5 projects. I want to do the exact same approach for the next 5 projects. That's where you get yourself into trouble. So in this case, by forcing yourself, if you're naturally rational, to now apply your intuition, that gut, to a brainstorming session or a problem solution activity that you're working on, or facilitating a session to try to come up with new ideas. Using that opposite method gets your brain to kind of say, whoa, stop. I can't fall into the trap of doing it how I've always done it. I'm forcing myself to use a different thinking style. And again, the result was in this particular study that those people using the opposite method that is naturally comfortable for them generated a significant improvement in both the number and in the quality of the ideas. And so this is an important, first step, which is just because you have a thinking style doesn't mean that you're stuck to that thinking style. And that, in fact, forcing yourself to try other thinking styles can actually help unleash your creative thinking. Again, creative thinking is not a single style or approach, but it does allow you to find a creative thinking style that works for you, given, again, are you left dominant creative, right brain creative? Are you more rational, or are you more intuitive? You can almost think about this as a 2x2 grid. Left-hand side of the axis is left or right brain. Horizontal axis is rational or intuitive. Which quadrant are you, right? And so the question becomes then is, can you use the other axes or the other 3 quadrants to be more creative and come up with a better set of ideas for whatever project or for whatever session that you're currently working on? So that is just step 1 in this process of proving to you and proving to ourselves that our thinking styles don't dictate whether we're creative or not. But the fact is that we can change our thinking styles and be highly and much more creative. So we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about convergence and divergence thinking. That's a different style of thinking that you actually want to apply across the stage of your creative thinking. When do you want to be divergent, and when do you want to be convergent thinking styles? So we're going to pick that up when we come back from this quick commercial break. Don't forget, show notes will be located over at killerinnovations.com. We'll have all the links out to the support materials that we're covering today in today's show. And stay right there. We will be right back.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Picking up where we left off, I want to talk about convergence and divergent thinking. Now, this is yet another thinking style. Some of us are a little bit more comfortable being one or the other. But let me first give you a definition of what do I mean by convergent thinking and divergent thinking. So divergent thinking usually includes the ability to elaborate, think diversely, come up with what could be versus what is. So questions you would ask in that case would be like, well, what if we could do this? Or how about let's try this? Or, hey, how about if we just try to, force the team to try to do something radically different? So divergent thinking is about what's possible. Now, divergent thinking is great for cranking out a lot of ideas. And you'll see that, in the beginning of a brainstorming session, you want to get your teams thinking divergently. You want to get out there and thinking very broadly. Well, the opposite of divergent thinking is convergent thinking. Convergent thinking is the ability to use logical, evaluative thinking really to critique and narrow down the ideas to the one that's kind of best suited to solve the problem. So again, you would start the project divergent because you want to get lots of ideas, but at some point in your process, you flip it to convergent thinking. Now, here's the challenge. Again, people tend to fall into one set of thinking styles here. Some people who it may be somewhat a little bit more left creative dominant, but they want to be more analytical. They want to filter out the ideas to get to the process of solving the problem. Divergent thinking tends to be a little bit more found in people who are right brain dominant, but again, it's not exclusive. But in the case of when you're trying to work on and come up with very new, creative, game-changing, breakthrough, killer innovations for your company, your business, or whatever organization you're involved in, you're pulling together people to help you out. The key here is to be very prescriptive. Step one in a brainstorming exercise is you want divergent thinking. You want the what if. What is possible? How could we? What if we did something like this? And so therefore, challenging the teams to stay divergent through the process of the brainstorming exercise is absolutely critical. Now, after you've collected all of the ideas, then the challenge becomes then is you do need convergent thinking. Now you've got a list of 200 ideas. What in the heck do you do with 200 ideas on a flip chart? In the past, most people would just type them up, send them around to everybody in the organization, and then what happens? Come on, be honest. What happens? Nothing happens because nobody knows what to do with 200 ideas. That's where convergent thinking comes into play. Convergent thinking is all about narrowing down those ideas and getting it down to those 2 or 3 ideas. Now, in our case, in the Killer Innovations methodology and what we teach in workshops and what we teach when we facilitate brainstorming sessions for companies and teams and organizations is a ranking exercise, which is convergent thinking. You are using a methodology, an approach, and a series of questions in order to go from 200 ideas down to 2 ideas, the ones that you're going to focus your primary time on. Now, step back and think about people that are in your organization. I'm going to bet that you can bucketize people within your team that are either divergent thinkers. So those are the guys that are just out there constantly thinking the future, blue sky. Some cases people may tag them as, they're not in touch with reality. They're just out there doing their thing. At the same time, you could probably sit back and bucketize people in your organization who are convergent thinkers. These are the people who are always telling you why an idea won't work. Well, I've tried that before, or I don't think there's enough money in it. Some cases you may classify them as antibodies, but in reality, they're applying what is in their history, what they know based on the past, what they've learned, the analysis that they're running around in their head. So the key for success in any form of innovation efforts, when you are trying to come up with ideas, is to get everybody, whether it's a natural thinking style or it's not their natural thinking style, but you need them to think divergently early in the process. And as you develop this big balloon of ideas, you need to narrow those down at some point. That's when you need to switch everybody and be very deliberate about it. At the very specific point in the process, you need to say, okay, we're no longer thinking divergently. We need to be convergent in our thinking. We need to narrow these ideas down so that we get the best 2 or 3 ideas that we can actually take forward, that we can pitch to management, that we can actually get some funding support for, and that we can actually go out and drive some experiments to see if this is really going to be the big hit that we all think it's going to be. And so in this case, it is, again, getting people out of what I would call a natural style and get them to think differently. And so divergent, very important in the early phases of the work, convergent at the end of the process as you want to narrow it down. And again, letting people fall back on the crutch that says, well, I'm just naturally this thinking style is bogus. We all can apply a different thinking style. We have a natural thinking style. Are you left dominant creative? Are you right dominant creative? Are you, intuitive? Are you divergent? All of these characteristics make up who we are from a natural perspective. But when it comes to creative thinking, you can actually step out of your natural thinking style and apply a different thinking style and be very, very creative. So don't let this become a crutch for you from the standpoint of saying, well, this is just how I think. This is my thinking style. That's a cop-out, and it doesn't work if you truly want to build out your creative thinking abilities. Look, why am I beating on this horse so much? Why have I been beating on this horse for 12 years of this show? It is because I am absolutely convinced that creative thinking is the number one skill you need to have if you're going to be successful, whether that's success in your personal life, whether that's success in your career, whether that's success in helping your organization go on to become something, magical and, high impact and change the world. If you don't tune up and improve your ability to be highly creative, and creative thinking is the number one skill you need to have, you are going to get left behind. Now, you're here listening to me right now, so obviously you already have kind of a natural bent to want to learn, to want to understand how to apply this to your world. This is the purpose of why we're here today. Don't fall into the trap thinking that you just have one thinking style. That's it. And that therefore then, either you're creative or you're not creative. Hopefully so far, we still got more to cover here coming up in the 4th segment. But the point here is that you can get out of your natural thinking processes, your own natural thinking styles, step into other thinking styles, and those will unlock a huge amount of creative ideas for you. And it's actually acting and operating in some cases in unnatural thinking styles that actually becomes the spark for some of those great innovations and those great ideas that you have. So when we come back, we're going to pick up where we left off here. We're going to continue our conversation. In last week's podcast, and in a speech that I recently gave, I talked specifically about deliberate thinking as a thinking style. And so I'm going to expand on that here in the 4th segment. We're going to talk specifically around deliberate thinking and what does that really mean and what role it plays in feeding and inspiring you and helping you to become much more creative. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we jump back into the show, I want to thank our sponsor this week, which is TopTal. TopTal is a company that is one of those really just great solutions to the problems of how do you find top technical talent. Now, I've been out there, I've recruited thousands and thousands of engineers over my time to work for me. But in some cases, what I'm looking for is a very unique expertise for a limited amount of time. I just need a help on a specific project, don't have the technical skills at my fingertips. Where do you go find that best top technical talent? Now, a number of months ago, we actually had the CEO for TopTal on. We had a great show. The end result was TopTal stepped up and offered to be a sponsor for Killer Innovations. Now, in the 12-year history of Killer Innovations, I've never taken a sponsor, so this is unique for us. It basically allows us to take the sponsorship dollars and actually apply it to the nonprofits. I've been sponsoring and funding this show out of my own pocket for 12 years. But now with TopTal, I can actually take those dollars that I normally would be funding to produce the show and actually funnel that directly into the nonprofits, both Pioneer Education Africa and Hacking Autism. So we appreciate their support because it helps the nonprofits. But why TopTal? It's because they go through a screening process like I've never seen. Less than 3% of those that apply ever get accepted into TopTal. So if you're looking for top technical and design talent, go check them out. We've already had a couple listeners of the Killer Innovation Show actually connect with TopTal, have projects underway, and I'm hearing really, really great feedback from those listeners who are engaged with TopTal on their projects. So don't delay. Go over to toptal.com/Phil, and they've got a special offer there for all listeners of the show. That being that you go try them out, get your project started. If at the end of 2 weeks, they're just not absolutely killing it, then you get 100% of your money back and you get to keep all the deliverables that were produced in those 2 weeks. So what do you have to lose? Go try them out, find just that right, perfect technical talent for the project that you've got, and go create that next breakthrough innovation. So let's pick up where we left off in the last segment, talking about deliberate thinking. Now, I've talked about deliberate thinking in this show in the past. I recently gave a speech to an organization called Maker Hub, where I talked about creative thinking as a skill. And I mentioned deliberate thinking in that speech, and I've gotten a couple of emails from people saying, Phil, what do you mean by deliberate thinking? The fact of the matter is that our brains are pretty lazy. We learn how to do things, and then it just comes natural to us. We know how to walk. We know how to, do certain things, talk. The things that we just are just naturally the things we do, and we fall into this rut. And as we've been talking through this entire show, thinking styles is one of those. Deliberate thinking is that process of stepping back, recognizing your thinking style. So earlier in the show, the whole process was for you to identify your thinking style. And now in the case of deliberate thinking is for you to stop, recognize the thinking style that you have, and try and apply different thinking styles to cause you to come up with better ideas. Now, deliberate thinking also, when I think about it in my context, is that ability to kind of say, whoa, time, take a breather, stop what you normally do, take the headphones out of your ears, don't be sitting there on Facebook all the time. Set aside a very specific time. Look at your own thinking styles. Think about all the other thinking styles that are out there, ones that will help you create ideas, be divergent, help you narrow down your options, be convergent, be more intuitive, be more analytical. Applying those variety of thinking styles, but be deliberate about it. Don't fall into the trap of just letting the natural thinking styles apply to you. So when I talk about deliberate thinking, it's about stop, take a breather, understand your thinking style, and apply other thinking styles to help be that spark for that next idea that you're coming up with. Okay? So, again, we started off thinking about left brain creatives versus right brain creatives. We thought about whether you're much more intuitive or much more analytical. We also talked, about all, being divergent, being convergent. These are all different styles of thinking. So we'll have more of this information in the show notes. So you want to definitely check out the show notes this week over at killerinnovations.com. So hopefully that you found this helpful. I would love to hear your feedback. We're trying a little bit of a different format on the shows. We've heard some feedback for people wanting to get back to or have some of our shows be more instructive like this, which was more in line with some of the older podcast formats. But we'd love to hear your feedback on that. Also, we've had some changes coming up. We've posted a new website for killerinnovations.com, so go over there and check it out. Much more mobile friendly and much easier on searching. So if you want to search through the archive, and 3, much faster. We heard a lot of complaints on the old site about how slow it was to get onto the site and find things. So again, new site for Kill Innovations. And by the way, we've launched a new site at philmckinney.com and over at beyondtheobvious.com, which is the website for my book. So you can check out all 3 of those sites. We also are getting ready we're collecting names for those of you who are interested in becoming part of an innovation mastermind group. We don't have anything locked down yet as to size or how many or timing, but you can go over to killerinnovations.com/mastermind, and you can add your name to the waiting list, and we'll keep you updated as we get more of our thinking put in place. And as always, leave a comment over on iTunes or leave a comment over at Kill Innovations in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me today. Hopefully you found this informative and helpful, and go out and experiment. Try those different thinking styles. With that, we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're Hacking Autism, a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.